Do you know how many women walk through life never realizing how profoundly magnetic they are? Not because of beauty in the way the world defines it, not in filters, curves, or carefully crafted profiles, but something deeper. There's a quiet power you carry, a presence, a way of moving through the world that leaves others affected even if you don't notice it yourself. Carl Jung called it the archetypal force, an unconscious energy that lives beneath the surface of your personality. It's not something you perform, it's something you are. And here's what's astonishing. The less aware you are of this power, the more authentic and captivating it becomes. And in today's hypervisual, always performing world, authentic energy isn't just rare, it's disarming. In The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle said, "Real presence has nothing to prove, it was meant to be remembered." Many women are taught to dismiss this inner magnetism, to tone it down, to fear being too much. But as Clarissa Pinkola reminds us, in Women Who Run with the Wolves, the wild soul was never meant to be caged. So today, I want to walk you through 12 powerful signs drawn from Jungian psychology and supported by modern psychological wisdom that reveal you far more attractive than you think. Some of these signs are so subtle, you may have misinterpreted them for years. But once you recognize them, something shifts. You begin to reclaim what the world tried to bury. And I need you to stay until the end, because sign number 9 is one of the most misunderstood signals of feminine power. Yet Jung believed it reveals more about your magnetic presence than any outward charm ever could. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how some men seem to lose their usual composure around you? They stumble over their words, they fiddle with their watch, adjust their shirt, laugh at things that aren't funny. It's like their body is trying to hide something their mind can't fully name. Now, you might have brushed this off thinking maybe they're shy or awkward. But Jung would say something far more profound is happening. He believed that when a woman carries authentic feminine energy, it awakens something ancient in a man's unconscious. He called it the anima, the inner feminine that every man holds within. And when that inner feminine is stirred by a real-life woman, one who isn't performing, pretending, or chasing validation, it creates a kind of psychological earthquake. He doesn't know why he's nervous, but his body knows. His unconscious knows. You've just touched a part of him that isn't used to being seen. In Attached, Dr. Amir Levine explains how anxious avoidant types often feel overwhelmed by emotional intensity, even when they crave it. That's exactly what you're witnessing, a collision between desire and defense. And in The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk reminds us that the body responds to threat and safety before the mind catches up. That nervous smile, that shaky voice, that's not fear, that's reverence. You are not just a woman to him. You've become a symbol, an archetype, something his soul recognizes, but his ego doesn't know how to approach. Here's the key. Don't shrink yourself to make him more comfortable. His discomfort isn't your problem. It's a mirror of your power. He's not confused because you're too much. He is confused because you've awakened something he has never met before, not in the world, and maybe not even in himself. You're walking down the street, standing in line, or just entering a room. You're not dressed to impress. You're not trying to command attention. But then someone looks at you, and after they pass, they glance again, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. It's not flirtation. It's not curiosity. It's recognition. Carl Jung believed that some people carry archetypal energy, an unconscious signature that activates something familiar in others. It's not about your appearance, it's about your presence. They don't consciously know why they're looking, but their body reacts first. As Dr. Bessel van der Kolk writes, in The Body Keeps the Score, the body has a mind of its own. Before the brain rationalizes, the body responds. That second glance, that the body saying, "There is something here I can't explain, but I feel it." In The Myth of Normal, Gabor talks about how modern life disconnects us from the authentic self. So when someone like you walks into a space fully aligned, not performative, not fractured, just whole, it disrupts the numbness. It wakes people up. The eyes respond not because they're admiring beauty, but because they've seen a real person. So the next time you catch someone looking again, don't brush it off. It might not be that you look different. It might be that you feel different. You've just reminded them, consciously or not, of something they forgot they were even looking for. You've had those days you didn't sleep well. Your hair didn't sit right. You threw on something simple and told yourself, "Today, I'm invisible." But then someone tells you, "You look radiant." Or, "There's something about you today." And you're caught off guard. You almost want to argue with them, because what they're seeing, you're not feeling. Carl Jung would say, this is the paradox of the shadow. We often bury the brightest parts of ourselves deep in the unconscious, right next to the parts we fear. He believed that others often see our light long before we do. And this is exactly what's happening. You think your presence is small, forgettable, but when you're not trying, your essence steps forward. In Atomic Habits, James Clear reminds us that identity isn't what you declare. It's what you reveal through small, repeated ways of being. So when you walk into a room without effort, without armor, something rare emerges, natural radiance. And in Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola calls this the return of the wild woman. Instinctive, unapologetically present. You may not see it, but when you speak without trying to be clever, when you smile without trying to be charming, when you exist without asking permission, Others feel something they can't name but don't want to stop looking at. Here's the truth. The compliments that feel off to you are actually the most real. They're not responding to how you think you look. They're responding to the truth you unconsciously allow to shine through. So don't dismiss those moments. They're not random. They're reflections of who you are beneath the doubt and who you've always been becoming. You've probably experienced it before. Someone asks for help with something they clearly don't need help with. They ask your opinion on a tiny decision. Start casual conversations that don't really go anywhere or linger near you, but don't say much at all. It might seem like coincidence, like small talk, like nothing, but Carl Jung had another word for it. Synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reflect unconscious desires and deeper truths. From a Jungian lens, when people approach you for seemingly insignificant reasons, their conscious mind is building bridges towards something their unconscious is craving: connection, presence, energy. As Gavin de Becker explains in The Gift of Fear, people often act on intuition without fully understanding it. They move toward what feels emotionally safe, grounded, or simply different from what they're used to. You become that gravitational center, not because you're saying or doing something remarkable, but because your energy feels like clarity in a noisy world. In The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle writes that being fully present creates a silent invitation one people don't even know they're responding to. So when someone texts you just to check in, or walks across the room to ask something they could have Googled, or stays near you long after the practical reason to be there is ended, they're not drawn to the topic. They're drawn to you. What they think they want is your input. What they actually want is your presence. So instead of seeing these moments as distractions or social noise, try seeing them for what they are. Evidence that your natural energy is silently influencing the world around you, even when you're not trying. Especially when you're not trying. You've been there. You walk into a room, you're polite, you're kind, you're not competing with anyone. And yet, you feel it, the glance that lingers just a little too long. The backhanded compliment. The passive-aggressive comment about something you weren't even thinking about. It feels unprovoked. You didn't do anything, but you still somehow became the target. Carl Jung would say, you've just triggered someone's shadow, the part we pretend doesn't exist. The shadow is the part of ourselves we reject. When someone hasn't faced their own inner insecurities, and they see in you what they've denied in themselves, they don't admire it, they attack at your authenticity, your ease, your quiet confidence. To someone disconnected from those things within themselves, you become a mirror they can't bear to look at. In Women Who Run with Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola writes that when a woman embodies her wild, intuitive nature, other women who have been taught to suppress their own may react with criticism, not curiosity. And in The Myth of Normal, Gabor explains how wounded people often defend themselves by projecting discomfort outward because it's safer than looking within. So no, you're not too much, you're not being dramatic, and you're certainly not imagining it. What you're witnessing is shadow projection in real time. Someone else's unhealed parts reacting to the unapologetic truth of who you are. And here's the important part. Don't shrink. Don't apologize for the space you take up, because your presence is not the problem, it's the invitation. An invitation for others to remember who they could be. If only they were brave enough to stop rejecting themselves. You're not saying a word, you're just standing there on the train, in a store, passing someone on the street, and suddenly, they smile. They don't approach, they don't flirt, they just smile, gently, quietly, sometimes like they've just remembered something beautiful. You may wonder, why? Carl Jung would say you've activated an archetype in their unconscious, what he called a universal symbol of wholeness. In you, they see something integrated, something real, and it resonates not with their mind, but with something much deeper. As Eckhart Tolle writes in The Power of Now, when someone is rooted in presence, they transmit peace without saying a word. It's as if your stillness becomes contagious, and in the body keeps the score. Bessel van der Kolk reminds us. The nervous system remembers what safety feels like. Your calm, your way of being. It whispers to others, you're okay here. These spontaneous smiles aren't about physical attraction. They're unconscious acknowledgments of something sacred, a moment of emotional resonance, without the need for words. You didn't do anything special, you didn't try. But sometimes, your very presence speaks a forgotten language, one the world rarely hears anymore. So when someone offers you a smile without reason, receive it, because in that small moment, they're not responding to how you look. They're responding to who you are, underneath it all. It's uncomfortable, you didn't ask for it. You're simply existing at work, at a dinner, walking into a room, and you notice a man looking at you, and he's not single. You don't flirt, you don't invite it. But still, the glance lingers longer than it should. He looks away, then back again, like he's trying to understand something that doesn't quite make sense to him. Carl Jung called this anima projection, when a man unconsciously projects his inner feminine onto a woman who embodies something he feels missing inside. It's not always about lust. It's about longing for integration, wholeness, depth, unattached. Dr. Emil Levine explains how people in secure-looking relationships often still carry unmet emotional needs beneath the surface. They don't even know they're seeking to fulfill. And in come as you are, Emily Nagoski describes how true attraction, T about physical stimulation, S about psychological safety and authenticity. The very things you radiate when you're not trying to impress anyone. When a man is drawn to you, despite being committed, it's often because your presence mirrors something he's repressed or forgotten. You awaken a part of him, his sensitivity, his wonder, his emotional depth, things the world has told him to bury. But let's be clear, you're not the problem. You didn't cause this. You're just living in your own energy hole, honest, present, and that can feel revolutionary to someone stuck in emotional survival mode. So the gaze, it's not about you being tempting, it's about you being true. And to someone who hasn't been around truth in a long time, it can feel both magnetic and maddening. Just remember, his reaction is not your responsibility, but it is a sign of how deeply your authenticity touches even those who can't explain why they feel drawn to you. You post something simple, a photo of your day, a quiet thought, nothing provocative, nothing filtered, no angles, no performance, and suddenly, your inbox fills. The likes rise. The comments roll in. You're surprised, because in your mind it wasn't even your best. But here's the thing, Carl Jung would say you just tapped into something real. He called it individuation, the process of becoming your whole, unedited self. And in a world addicted to artificial personas, authenticity is magnetic. People don't respond because you showed more skin or struck a perfect pose. They respond because, in that moment, you weren't performing. As James Clear explains in Atomic Habits, consistency beats intensity. And when your posts reflect your actual self without filters or pretense, people sense that stability, that truth, even through a screen. Emily Nagoski writes in Come As You Are that real attraction begins with safety, emotional safety, not in how someone looks, but in how they make you feel. Even your digital presence can radiate that kind of energy. And in The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle reminds us that presence can be felt beyond words and form. Your energy doesn't stop at the edges of your body. It lives in how you speak, how you write, how you show up even online. So no, it's not about having a look. It's about having alignment between who you are and how you express it. People aren't drawn to your post. They're drawn to you, the real you that slips out in unguarded moments. That's the power most people are too busy editing themselves to ever tap into. And yet, you did it without even trying. One day, he's drawn to you, texting, laughing, making time. He seems deeply interested, maybe, even and then just like that he disappears. No warning, no closure. Then, as suddenly as he vanished, he comes back. If this has happened to you, you've probably wondered, what did I do wrong? Was I too much? Too intense? But Carl Jung would say, you did nothing wrong. In fact, you might have done something incredibly right. He called this inner reversal, the tendency of things to transform into their opposite when pushed to extremes. In simpler terms, when someone experiences too much truth, too much depth, too much presence, it can trigger an internal storm they're not prepared to face. It's not that he didn't feel something real, it's that he did, and it scared him. In Attached, Dr. Amir Levine explains that people with avoidant tendencies crave intimacy, but flee when it arrives, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and for many, that's terrifying. You didn't overwhelm him, you've activated him. You touched something in his unconscious that he couldn't rationalize, and when the ego feels out of control, it shuts down to protect itself. Dr. Gabor, in The Myth of Normal, says that most of us are walking around with unhealed emotional wounds, and when real connection comes along, it doesn't always feel safe. Sometimes, it feels like danger, even when it's exactly what the soul longs for. So when a man pulls away, then returns, as if nothing happened, he's not playing games. He's looping between the pull of the soul and the armor of the ego, caught in a cycle between fear and desire. And if this has happened to you, let me tell you, his confusion isn't proof of your failure. It's proof of your impact, because very few people carry an energy so authentic, so unfiltered, that it forces others to confront their inner chaos. You're not just another interaction. Is no small thing. You're a mirror reflecting back to him a version of himself he both craves and fears. And that, have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible, only to later hear someone say, you lit up the whole space? Or you casually said something in passing, something small, something you barely thought about, and someone else said, that changed how I see things. You didn't mean to impress. You didn't try to stand out. And yet, Carl Jung believed that the most powerful version of a person, isn't the ego, the part that tries, performs, or compares. It's the self, the integrated, grounded essence that quietly radiates from deep within. And here's the twist. The self doesn't need to feel powerful to be powerful. It just is, in quiet. Susan Cain explains how the most influential people often go unnoticed at first because their strength, isn't loud, it's steady, it's calming, it's real. And in The Gifts of Imperfection, Braun reminds us that true confidence doesn't come from proving you're enough. It comes from knowing that you already are. So yes, you may underestimate yourself. You may wonder if you're doing enough, saying enough, being enough. You may compare yourself to louder, shinier, more curated versions of success, but meanwhile, people are watching you, noticing the way you listen, the way you make them feel seen without trying, the way you carry integrity in a world built on masks. That's power, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that shifts the room quietly, without asking for permission. So if you don't always feel powerful, it doesn't mean you aren't. It just means you're aligned with something so natural, so authentic, that you've forgotten it's rare. Sometimes, it doesn't hit them while you're there. You're just part of the room. You're listening, smiling, present, but then you leave. And suddenly, the energy shifts. The conversation feels thinner. The atmosphere grows quieter, like something essential just left the space. Carl Jung believed in something called teosa, sacred psychological space created by authentic presence. It's not about charisma or attention, it's about resonance. You hold space without trying. And when that energy is removed, people feel it event, if they can't explain what's changed. In The Myth of Normal, Dr. Gabor writes that most environments are unconsciously built around dysfunction and survival. So when someone who is grounded, safe, and self-aware enters the room, they don't just participate, they regulate the emotional field around them. And when that person leaves, so does the stability. Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now says that true presence is a portal not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. When you're deeply present, you hold a mirror to other stillness. You give permission for silence, softness, and authenticity. That's why they feel your absence more than your presence. Because while you were there, they may not have been fully conscious of your effect, but once you're gone, what they were leaning on disappears. You don't have to be the loudest or the most visible, you just have to be real. And when you are, you leave a space emptier by your exit than it was before your arrival. So if you've ever received a message that said, "It wasn't the same without you," know this, that's not flattery. That's recognition of a presence powerful enough to reshape the emotional climate simply by existing in it. There's a kind of silence that's awkward, fidgety, forced, the kind people rush to fill with noise, jokes, scrolling, or empty words. But then, there's you. You sit with someone, and the conversation slows, but they don't reach for their phone. They don't rush to speak, they just breathe. The silence feels full, charged, like something is being exchanged, but nothing needs to be said. Carl Jung called this depth, active imagination of space, where words fall away, and something unconscious begins to move. In your presence, others don't feel the need to perform. They feel permission to exist. Eckhart Tolle describes this as the power of presence, where silence becomes a portal into connection, not a void. And in Come As You Are, Emily Nagoski explains how trust and emotional resonance are often built not in what's said, but in how someone feels when they're with you. So when people can sit beside you without tension, when they fall quiet but stay close, when they say, "I don't know what it is about you," but they can't stop coming back, what they're responding to isn't your charm, it's your safety, your stillness, your ability to hold space without needing to fill it. And as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk reminds us in The Body Keeps a Score, the nervous system is shaped by trauma but also by safety. When people experience you as calm, grounded, and fully present, their body recognizes you before their mind ever can. That's why silence with you doesn't feel empty. It feels sacred. It's not awkward. It's alive. So if you've ever wondered why some people open up to you without knowing why, or why they never seem to want to leave your side, it's because your energy doesn't just speak, it listens. And in that listening, in that quiet, people find parts of themselves they didn't know were missing. So now I want to ask you, how many of these signs have you experienced? How many times have you dismissed them thinking it was nothing, that it didn't mean what it felt like? Because here's the truth. You've likely spent years wondering if you're enough, trying to fix, prove, or perform your way into being seen. But Carl Jung would tell you, you were already radiating something ancient, a presence, a pattern, an archetypal light breaking through the surface of ordinary life. You didn't need to try harder, you just needed to recognize what was already flowing through you. And this isn't about vanity or ego, it's about, as Clarissa Pinkola said, the woman who reclaims her wild self becomes luminous in ways she does not always see but others feel deeply. Your silence, your laughter, your calm in a storm, or your discomfort in shallow places. These are not weaknesses. They're signals of something sacred inside you becoming visible. In The Myth of Normal, Gabor reminds us that most of us were never taught how to feel whole. We were taught how to survive. So when someone like you comes along, someone embodying even fragments of authenticity, you don't just attract people. You awaken them. You remind them of what it feels like to be near truth. So if this message stirred something in you, if you felt seen, remembered, or even challenged in a new way, don't ignore that, because that feeling, that quiet recognition, that is your real self answering the call. The goal is not to become magnetic. You already are. The goal is simply to stop dimming the signal. And if you're ready to explore more of these deeper truths, subscribe, join us. Every week, we dive into what psychology, myth, and soul are trying to tell us about ourselves and about each other. Because as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It's time to stop calling your power coincidence. It's time to own it.